Harry being taken to the hospital under suspicious circumstances, and they are saying it could be because of an overdose.
Prince Harry has just been rushed to the hospital in critical condition following an incident believed to be an overdose involving stimulant substances. But what has shocked the public even more lies elsewhere. Meghan Markle, the wife who has stood by him through every storm, quickly established an alibi by appearing at a private club on the very night the incident occurred. And strangely, the palace has remained completely silent, as if nothing had ever happened. As a wave of questions erupted across the media, what really happened? The royal palace maintained a chilling silence. There has been no official statement from King Charles or Prince William. Meghan suddenly vanished from the lenses of the global press. Yet within newsroom walls, whispers began to spread. Harry had experienced breakdowns before, but this might be the first time he crossed a truly dangerous line. What could have driven a once-admired prince so close to the edge of collapse? Was it a random accident or the result of a pharmaceutical shock? And more importantly, why has such a life-threatening crisis involving a senior member of the royal family been concealed as though it were a matter of national security? The full truth, or whatever remains hidden, will be revealed in this video. 1. The prince found unconscious and rushed to emergency. It was a quiet morning in Montecito, California, a neighborhood where the ultra-wealthy reside and where untold secrets often exist in silence. But at exactly 4 to 12 a.m. this past Monday, that peace was suddenly shattered by the piercing sound of ambulance sirens. Inside a multi-million-dollar estate hidden behind rows of laurel trees and a secured iron gate, an emergency was unfolding, one no Hollywood script would dare attempt to portray. A night shift security guard discovered Prince Harry lying motionless on the marble floor of the living room, unresponsive, unconscious, and struggling for air. His face was pale. His lips had turned an icy shade of purple, classic signs of severe oxygen deprivation. The heart that once burned with fiery defiance in controversial interviews and explosive documentaries, and in his drawn-out battle with the royal institution, now beat erratically and faintly like the dying flicker of a candle's final flame. A rapid response medical team from the Santa Barbara Emergency Station arrived in under 6 minutes. At first, they had no idea whose life they were about to save until someone identified him. It's Prince Harry, and his condition is extremely critical. Upon entering the room, the paramedics were confronted by a chilling reality. Everything they had ever read in the tabloids was now staring them in the face. On a solid oak table sat a small, unlabeled glass vial, its cap dislodged and lying askew. Inside was a residue of fine powder gray with a strange bluish tint, possibly remnants of ground-up hallucinogenic mushrooms or a synthetic substance with powerful stimulant effects. Nearby sat a still-warm teacup and an old, worn book on Peruvian spiritual rituals, rumored to be a gateway to the spirit world. On the spot, medics began checking his vitals. Blood pressure had plummeted. Oxygen saturation had dropped to a dangerous level. An adrenaline injection was administered, immediately followed by an oxygen mask, while the team leader urgently contacted the Poison Control Center for backup. In an instant, the luxurious villa transformed into an improvised medical battlefield. Harry was secured onto a stretcher, his limbs carefully immobilized, a heart monitor strapped to his chest, and swiftly wheeled to the ambulance. One arm dangled loosely, chillingly cold, still dusted with fine white powder from the mysterious glass vial. The moment the ambulance doors slammed shut, the name Harry appeared on the emergency monitor, not for a royal appearance, not for scandal, but for a life, hanging perilously on the edge between survival and demise. The name Harry being associated with drugs is nothing new. In fact, he has openly admitted to past use in ways that once shocked the world. In his memoir, Spare, Harry revealed he first tried cocaine at 17, smoked cannabis on the grounds of eaten, drank alcohol to the point of vomiting as a teenager, and even consumed hallucinogenic mushrooms, once laughing uncontrollably as he watched a toilet bowl melt and morph. He also described taking ayahuasca, a potent psychoactive brew from the Amazon rainforest, which he called a bridge to the spirit of my mother. But beyond the vivid hallucinations lies a far darker reality. Prince Harry has long been grappling with psychological wounds that have never truly healed. Ever since the death of Princess Diana, the 12-year-old boy was thrown into a brutal media storm. He did not cry. He did not feel. He showed no emotion, just a hollow void in his eyes. Years later, Harry would admit to falling into spirals of panic disorder depression and crippling anxiety so intense that he was often too terrified to step outside his own home. He took medication to suppress the emotions, and in his own words, drugs worked faster. In a conversation with famed trauma expert Dr. Gabor Mate, Harry was said to exhibit signs of ADHD. He confessed he had been crushed by the past and that psychedelics helped me recover parts of myself. But was that truly a form of healing, or merely a luxury mask to hide a spirit in crisis? What's most alarming is that this isn't his first collapse. According to those close to him, there had been many times they felt uneasy watching Harry teeter between two extremes, trying to heal, yet repeatedly steering himself towards self-destruction. A prince who once walked the battlefields of Afghanistan had now collapsed within the walls of his own home, brought down by a war raging invisibly inside his mind. He once yearned to escape the gilded cage of royal life, but now is he building a new prison for himself, made of mushrooms, smoke, and illusions? 2. The unusual absence of the wife. Yet throughout the entire duration of this serious crisis, Meghan was nowhere to be found. No family member appeared, no cries were heard, and not a single word echoed through the house where a life or death emergency was unfolding. Only the distant wail of the ambulance siren cut through the thick darkness, carrying the rebellious prince away from the home he had built straight into the place that would determine his fate, the intensive care unit. Meghan Markle was not only absent when the incident occurred, she was also accused of deliberately leaving the house to attend a private party held at an exclusive luxury club, catering solely to the ultra-wealthy at the exact moment her husband was being rushed to the hospital in critical condition. A bartender at the club confirmed that Meghan showed up in a sparkling black dress, radiant like a star preparing to walk the red carpet. She was seated next to a documentary filmmaker known for working with Netflix and a powerful female executive from the high fashion industry. They laughed, clinked glasses, exchanged cheerful glances, and in every gesture Meghan made, there was no sign of concern for the husband who was at that very moment fighting through a mental crisis. When a distress call came in from the security team at her residence, a staff member claimed Meghan had gestured to silence her phone, then continued the conversation as if nothing unusual had occurred. Even more telling, just a few hours later, she exited the club through a back door, deliberately avoiding all camera lenses and paparazzi. Not long afterward, she posted an old photo to Instagram showing herself relaxing at home, as if subtly asserting that she had no involvement in what was happening outside. Immediately, whispers began circulating in Hollywood's off-the-record conversations. Could Meghan be laying the groundwork for a backup plan? A media figure formerly close to the couple revealed. She's always been haunted by the idea that something terrible could happen to Harry, not necessarily because she feared for him, but because she feared being caught in the fallout. Meghan's been planning her exit for a long time. Because of that fear, it's said that Meghan often maintained a strategic distance whenever her husband slipped into instability. Solo trips, private parties without him, and business deals that didn't include Harry's name all served as evidence of one thing. If he collapses, she wants to make sure she doesn't go down with him. A former friend remarked coldly. Bitterly, the same Harry who once described Meghan as the saving light in the darkness was now in the darkest hour of his life, left without that light. Some commentators argue that Meghan's absence was no accident. On the contrary, they believe she left deliberately with precision and timing in order to craft a legal shield for herself in the future. Should Harry fail to recover, or if this trauma leaves lasting consequences, will Meghan appear as the grieving wife? Or the woman who had long prepared her escape? In Hollywood, this is called a contingency plan. But in royal culture, the name might be far more damning betrayal and silence. Imagine that scene: a man unconscious, needing urgent care by the minute, and the one person who should have been by his side was off elsewhere raising a glass with friends. In those critical life or death hours, those who should have stood by him vanished. Meghan, rather than keeping vigil at the hospital like any other wife, is believed to have left in haste to establish a solid alibi. And this is no longer speculation. An eyewitness has confirmed seeing her at that exclusive club that night, beaming, smiling, as if nothing serious had just happened to her husband. 3. Warning signs from the past. The night Prince Harry collapsed at the Montecito estate was not just an accident. It was the final alarm in a long, silent descent, a wound that had been quietly bleeding for over 20 years. This story began in the early 2000s when Harry was still just a teenager. At the time, the image of the bright red-haired boy in his boarding school uniform gave the public reassurance. But behind the ancient stone walls of Highgrove, whispers of concern had already started. Several royal staff members later recalled discovering beer cans stashed under the bed, dried cannabis hidden in jacket pockets, and nights when Harry would sneak out only to return with bloodshot eyes and disheveled clothes. One winter night in 2001, at just 16 years old, Harry was found unconscious in a horse stable reeking of cheap vodka. It took 2 bodyguards more than 2 hours to discreetly carry him back to his room. It was around this time that Prince Charles began to sense something was wrong. But rather than bringing his son to see a psychologist or addiction specialist, he chose to send Harry to a youth rehabilitation center for a few days a move, more for appearances than any real treatment. The palace knew, the servants knew, and they all collectively chose silence, prioritizing the royal family's reputation. In 2005, Harry sparked outrage by showing up to a costume party dressed in a Nazi uniform. But behind the moral backlash was a more disturbing detail that was barely mentioned that night. He allegedly took ketamine, a powerful anesthetic drug often misused for its hallucinogenic effects. A medic in his escort team noted in a confidential report that Harry's pupils were abnormally dilated. His blood pressure had spiked dangerously, and he had completely lost touch with reality. Still, the palace's response was simply a soft apology to the public, followed by a swift silencing of any further questions. The downward spiral continued silent but severe. In 2007, rumors emerged that Harry had snorted vodka through his nose at a party in Ibiza, an act so reckless that even his security team couldn't believe what they were seeing. One retired bodyguard later told the Australian press, "He did it while laughing like he was performing some mad ritual. I've seen all kinds of behavior, but never a prince so determined to destroy himself." Doctors warned that consuming alcohol nasally could cause permanent brain damage or even death. Yet again, the media remained silent. When news of the world, one of the few outlets with detailed evidence prepared to publish a story, they were conveniently shut down over a phone hacking scandal. And so, the proof vanished into oblivion. Fearing that Harry might go too far in public nightclubs, Prince Charles made a strange decision. He had a private nightclub built right on the Highgrove estate grounds, complete with a DJ booth, laser lights, and soundproof rooms where Harry could blow off steam in a controlled environment. But the idea backfired. Instead of being a safe space, it became a fortress of chaos, where Harry and his friends partied with no limits. On some nights, he drank until he collapsed in the bathroom, vomiting blood, and had to be dragged out by a housemaid wrapped in a blanket while the public still saw only the image of the brave Marine prince. By 2010, Harry's psychological disturbances had become more evident than ever. A leaked confidential report later revealed that he frequently dreamed of Princess Diana, his mother, crying and calling his name. On one occasion, he claimed to have seen her sitting in a corner of the room, classic symptoms of visual hallucination. Doctors suspected he was using LSD or other powerful hallucinogens. But when asked, Harry always refused to answer. And the palace has always maintained silence. When Meghan Markle entered Harry's life, many hoped she would be the final lifeline. But love cannot fill holes carved out by decades of neglect. Harry continued to pursue spiritual healing therapies, traveling to Peru and using ayahuasca and other hallucinogenic plant medicines to connect with his inner self. Some sources revealed that during one ceremony, he lost consciousness entirely and had to be revived with oxygen for 20 minutes. But none of this was ever disclosed to the public because it was incompatible with his public image. And so when Harry was found lying motionless in the Montecito mansion, lips turning blue heart rhythm, erratic, an unmarked glass vial tossed nearby, and a half-read spiritual book left on the coffee table, all the fragments from the past came rushing back. This was not the first fall. It was the consequence of hundreds of silent descents that no one had cared to acknowledge. It was the wordless cry for help that had echoed for 2 decades from a royal trapped in a shell of fame he never chose. And this time, he stood frighteningly close to the point of no return. One step further, and the world might have already been saying goodbye. 4. Meghan enters and takes control of everything. While the global public remained consumed by debates over soft power and internal fractures within the British royal family, another narrative darker, more disturbing, was quietly spreading. It was the theory that Meghan Markle was not merely the loyal wife standing by Prince Harry through every storm, but the one who led him deeper into the world of substance abuse, slowly transforming a rebellious but sharp-minded prince into a faded, manipulated shadow of himself, steadily losing control. This suspicion stemmed not only from Harry's gaunt appearance during public outings or his lack of clarity during televised interviews. It also originated from whispered accounts passed between those who had once lived within the couple's orbit, former staff, close friends, and even attendees of private parties hidden behind glamorous spotlights. They claimed Meghan was fully aware of Harry's fragile mental state. Some even alleged that she encouraged or worse orchestrated his exposure to various stimulants as a subtle means of control. It was a serious accusation, but surprisingly not an entirely baseless one. Before donning the royal wedding gown, Meghan was a familiar face on Hollywood's party circuit. Not for her acting, her most notable role was a supporting lawyer in the series Suits, but for her frequent presence at extravagant hush-hush gatherings filled with smoke and secrets. The most infamous of these was her first wedding in Jamaica, a celebration remembered not for heartfelt vows or emotional moments, but for the unusual wedding favors. According to several guests, each person left the party with a small gift bag, not filled with candy or souvenirs, but with pre-rolled joints of cannabis. An act that may have seemed cool or playful to some, but one fraught with serious risk, especially when many guests unknowingly carried them back to the U.S. and faced possible airport detainment for transporting illegal substances across borders. That incident raised a troubling question. Was Meghan truly unfamiliar with the world of recreational drugs? Or had it always been a part of her lifestyle, once she quietly folded into her new life with Harry? When juxtaposed with Harry's own public admissions of using hallucinogens, like ayahuasca magic mushrooms and cannabis in his quest to heal after his mother's death, the theory that Meghan didn't just tolerate but may have facilitated his usage becomes all the more chilling. Then came the moment in 2020 when Meghan urged Harry to step away from the British royal family, a decision that stunned the world. A man born to inherit the throne chose to relinquish it all: his titles, his duties, and even his family. Many rushed to blame the media or the suffocating pressures of royal life. But the more one examined the timeline, the clearer the signs became. Behind that earth-shaking decision was the deliberate hand of Meghan Markle. From the moment she officially joined the royal family, Meghan began constructing a world of her own, one where everything revolved around her. According to those who worked within palace walls, Meghan didn't merely integrate, she dominated. Traditions were questioned, rules were deemed outdated, and any voice of criticism was swiftly labeled racist. While the royal household scrambled to formulate a response, Meghan had already cast herself as the victim of the system, effectively forcing Harry to take her side or be branded weak, a man too timid to defend his wife. 5. When things are no longer Harry's choice. Little by little, Meghan severed every tie between Harry and his birth family. Phone calls became rarer. Planned visits were postponed or canceled, and anyone who dared to voice concerns or criticism about Meghan, from William and Charles to Harry's oldest friends, was systematically pushed out of his life. Through heartfelt whispers, Meghan subtly planted a haunting idea in Harry's mind: they don't truly love you. They just want to control you. As the world around him narrowed, Harry seemed to have only one remaining anchor, but that anchor was Meghan. Then came the masterstroke. Meghan persuaded Harry to leave England with a plan famously dubbed Megxit. She painted an alluring vision of life in America: no more rigid ceremony, no intrusive paparazzi, no disapproving public eyes, only the golden California sun, an unbound life, and most importantly, their own distinct voice. But what was the truth behind that dream? The moment they escaped royal constraints, Meghan immediately turned Harry into a media tool. From Netflix to Spotify to the memoir Spare, every fissure in Harry's family relationships was exploited to build the Sussex empire, all under Meghan's discreet management. One of Meghan's most sophisticated manipulation tactics was role reversal. To the public, she ceased to be the dominant wife and became the vulnerable victim of an oppressive royal system. Harry was cast as her champion, the gallant knight, who risked everything to challenge archaic traditions for the woman he loved. But it was a meticulously orchestrated performance where Meghan not only wrote the script but starred in it and controlled every aspect of the set. She didn't stop there. Meghan steadily dismantled Harry's former identity. The decorated former officer and active royal philanthropist was reshaped into Meghan's husband, a man who recounted his pain on American talk shows. The independent, strong image that once defined him faded with time. Now he's no longer a prince, merely a supporting character in the reality series Meghan wrote, directed, and controlled. Even in their personal life, sources who worked for the couple affirm that Meghan controlled almost every family decision, from where they lived and what time they rose to parenting choices. She erected invisible barriers, supposedly to safeguard their image, but in reality to police every interaction who could see Harry, who was banned what could be said and what must never be mentioned. Harry, once decisive, now merely nodded through every circumstance. Terrifyingly, Meghan didn't need anger or violence to dominate him. Instead, she weaponized conditional gentleness. She made Harry believe he was loved, understood, and chosen, so long as he adhered to the script she had laid out for him. Whenever Harry expressed a desire to reconnect with his family, it sparked a fierce argument. Next came tears, punitive silence, and long, tension-filled nights without resolution. Over time, Harry learned one hard truth to avoid conflict. It was better to cut every tie Meghan couldn't manipulate. Multiple insiders report that during the period when the couple left the royal family and settled in the US, Meghan intensified her absolute control over Harry. She became the sole gatekeeper of media access. Every interview, every public appearance was meticulously storyboarded. Meanwhile, Harry, with his gaunt frame and distant eyes, was no longer the man who abandoned his family for love, nor the veteran soldier who risked his life in Afghanistan. He had become a puppet placed in a glittering but artificial world, controlled by a wife who was intelligent, tactful, precisely calculating. And within that world, substances may have become the soft chains binding Harry, keeping him perpetually dazed, manipulable, and controllable. If this is true, it's not just the tragedy of a man, it's a form of dangerous psychological abuse cleverly disguised as healing and love. Perhaps it's time to ask this chilling but necessary question. Was Meghan truly the wife who saved Harry from the royal machine, or the one who ignited the blaze that turned his life to ashes? But the matter deepens further. Meghan's mother, Doria, has not escaped scrutiny. Locals in California who know her well claim she has long-standing ties to the local underground scene and remains entangled in murky relationships to this day. Though no direct evidence exists, rumors whispered behind closed doors persist. The Markle family always knows where to go to get what they want, and above all, how to keep everyone in line. When all these facts are woven together, the hypothesis that Meghan controls Harry's life becomes darker than ever, not just by enabling substance abuse, but by turning it into a tool, an invisible leash ensuring his dependence, silence, and obedience. Yet what chills most is not Meghan. It's how many people around them knew exactly what was happening and chose to stay silent for so many years. 6. When the palace turns truth into illusion. From all-night binge parties, nude photos circulating through Las Vegas, to his unrestrained public outbursts, any of these incidents would be enough to derail someone else's life. But not Harry. He remains unscathed, not by luck, but because a massive media machinery stands firmly behind him, ready to mobilize at the first sign of trouble. Buckingham Palace. A symbol of solemnity and tradition, is in fact one of the most sophisticated media fortresses imaginable, capable of controlling public perception even more swiftly than the biggest tabloids. Whenever unfavorable information about Harry threatens to leak the system, springs into action, compromised journalists receive directives. Stories are swiftly removed, and in the very next headlines, you see Prince Harry smiling beside a hospital bed, of a child with cancer, or standing proudly in military uniform against a barren desert backdrop. Even when rumors surfaced that Harry had used drugs since age 17, the palace conceded only a fraction, promptly redirecting public focus with a re-imaging campaign. Harry was sent to a rehab facility within a single day. Media outlets united to portray him as a brave prince facing his mistakes. And 3 days later, all of Britain rallied behind the narrative of a resurrected hero. Scandals that seemed undeniable were erased as if they'd never existed. Notably, this protection isn't born of compassion, it stems from fear. The royal family understands that if someone like Harry, a sixth in line to the throne, were exposed as an addict who lost control, the scandal would shatter not only his reputation, but the monarchy's standing as well. So even when they hold the truth, they choose to bury it beneath velvet silence. Their protection goes beyond concealment. Inside, sources reveal there exists a dedicated team handling Harry's image cracks. When he misbehaves at a nightclub, surveillance footage disappears after discreet negotiations. When he gets high at a private party, a charity initiative is launched within hours. Each misstep is traded for glamorous photos or heartwarming stories, like a media magic trick replacing the truth with pleasant emotions. Over the years, Harry has never truly faced consequences. Instead, his silence has been rewarded. That protection didn't help him wake up, it deepened his directionlessness. He learned as long as he stays quiet and lets the palace manage the fallout, all issues will fade away. And so he keeps spiraling quietly in the dark, unstoppable. Beyond the palace itself, mass media also plays a role. Numerous national outlets willingly cooperate, not from reverence for royalty, but out of a mutually beneficial agreement. When the monarchy provides a few charming photos of William taking his child to school, or the Queen smiling beside flower beds, the press forgets about Harry screaming drunk in a nightclub. Everything is carefully calculated, like a trade truth is the first bargaining chip. Even after Harry officially left the royal family, the protection continued. Though no longer directly responsible, the palace still shields the image of the lost son, rather than allow him to be seen as a broken man. They know if stories about addiction, paranoid episodes, or mistreatment of loved ones surfaced publicly, the moral foundation of centuries-old monarchy could crumble overnight. Ironically, this excessive shielding doesn't save Harry. It pushes him further away from himself. When someone never faces the repercussions of their actions, they never get the chance to change. And that's the greatest tragedy, not that Harry once struggled with addiction, but that he was taught error can always be covered up as long as you're royal. Fast forward to today, and the reality looks grim. A man sinking deeper into addiction, surrounded by people who know the truth but choose to pretend they don't. No warning, no genuine intervention. Day by day, Harry slips into darkness, a darkness woven by those closest to him. Meghan Markle now stands accused of planting exculpatory evidence for that fateful night when Harry was found unconscious. Immediately, the palace moved to red alert. But as always, no official statements were released. If the circulating reports are accurate, what we're witnessing isn't a spontaneous crisis. It is the culmination of a lifetime buried in pain, bound by unbridled freedom, and most terrifyingly prolonged manipulation. A man who never got the chance to truly heal is now the emblem of a modern royal tragedy where nobody dares to speak the truth. When rumors broke that Prince Harry collapsed due to a drug overdose, Britain should have shaken from top to bottom. This was a senior royal, the current monarch's son, on the brink of death. But the public received no official word, no prayer from the royal household, not even a single confirming line. All that remains is a chilling silence as cold and relentless as the cracks spreading through Buckingham Palace. Even when independent news outlets picked up the story, even as social media was flooded with one burning question: where is Harry? The only response from the palace was deafening silence, as if nothing had happened at all. No statements from the royal family, not a single word from King Charles. Every uncomfortable truth was wrapped neatly in that familiar silk handkerchief of tradition, accompanied by the age-old message, "This is a family matter, and it will be handled privately." But behind this calm facade operated a frantic machine, working at full capacity, bent on protecting the flawless image of the monarchy, even at the cost of a son's life. Sources within the palace confirm that King Charles was made aware of the situation early. But instead of mourning, instead of acting, he chose to hold a closed-door meeting with his media advisors. Crisis response plans were drafted in secret. His top priority at that moment wasn't Harry's health or even his survival, but one brutal question: how do we keep this off tomorrow's front page? For Charles, perhaps Harry's collapse posed less danger than a collapse of the monarchy's public honor. The palace had grown masterful at treating scandals like small fires. But this time the fire didn't flare, it smoldered quietly in the dark. Tragically, that coldness was no accident. For years, the relationship between Harry and his father had withered, becoming little more than two strangers sharing the Windsor surname. Harry's exit from royal life, his confessional interviews with American talk shows, and most of all his memoir, Spare a Knife Plunged Straight into the Monarchy's Pride, had left Charles viewing his son not as kin, but as a threat to the crown. The palace understood the consequences of acknowledging Harry's critical condition. It would trigger a chain reaction of questions: why, how bad, who's responsible? It would mean tearing off the carefully constructed masks they had worn for years, exposing their indifference, their concealment, and their failure to protect one of their most vulnerable members. And for a monarch still struggling to solidify his reign, that was a risk Charles could not afford. So instead of facing it, the monarchy kept moving as though nothing had happened. Charles continued appearing at public events, still delivering speeches about Britain's future. The royal media team even released new photos of Prince George and Princess Kate, an elegant distraction for the public. Meanwhile, his youngest son, clinging to life in silence, was nowhere to be seen. No one could say for certain whether Harry was still conscious, or had already crossed a line from which he could never return. Charles's silence wasn't just emotional detachment. It was a message loud and clear without a single word. Anyone who turns against the crown is no longer one of us. And Harry, the soldier who once fought for his country, the little boy who once walked hand in hand with his mother behind her coffin, was now a name too taboo to mention. Erased from official coverage as though he never existed. Just like the royal family had done with every historical blemish before him. But the public is no longer naive. This silence didn't make the scandal disappear. It made it more chilling. People began to ask if they can stay silent about nearly losing their own son. What else might they be hiding? And thus it is the silence, not the lies, that has become the deepest fracture, threatening to shatter the faith in a monarchy once believed to be unshakable. And what about you? What do you think? Behind the polished, stoic facade of the royal family is there a machine so calculated, so driven by image that it would willingly sacrifice the well-being and happiness of its own flesh and blood, just to preserve the illusion of prestige. If Harry truly is at the bottom of the abyss, who will be the one to reach out and pull him back? Or will they keep pretending everything is fine, as if nothing serious ever happened? How many times must a person collapse before the truth is finally acknowledged with honesty? And in the end, is Meghan really the only one who deserves the blame? Or is this a far more complex tragedy woven together by hands far more powerful than we've dared to imagine? Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this video. If you too believe that what happens behind the curtain deserves to be questioned, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss our next deep dive. We'll continue digging not to condemn, but to bring to light what's long been buried. Because sometimes all it takes is the right question at the right moment, to awaken a machine that's spent too long basking in glory and forgotten the truth.